Good evening, everybody. Welcome again to Maghull Wind Orchestra in Conversation. This is another one of our very popular series highlighting members of the band and their roles within the band. Today, it's the turn of the brass section, and I'm very pleased to be joined by three of our brass section, all three of whom serve on the MWO committee. We have Geoff Ward, principal horn player, Adam Dutch, principal bass trombonist. In fact, he's the best bass trombonist in our band, as the only one. And Chris Horswood, the principal trombone. So plenty of lower brass and a little bit in the middle. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining me this evening. And if you're watching us live on Zoom for the Maghull Wind Orchestra members, welcome. It's really nice to see you. This will be recorded and it will be going out on YouTube. So if you're watching in the future, you are very welcome too. And if you'd like to see any of the previous In Conversations with, they're all up there on YouTube as well. We'll be answering questions in real time if you have any. If you're on this live Zoom chat, you can use the chat function on Zoom and type in a question, and we'll endeavour to answer anything you may particularly like to talk about. As we have done with these in the past, it's nice for our members to find out a little bit more about other members in the band, particularly those of us who are on our committee. So we're going to go around our guests this evening and firstly find out where their musical journey started and find out what their musical background is and their education and where they've ended up now. So perhaps if we go from higher brass to lower brass, Geoff, can you tell us a little bit about sort of what got you playing and how you started your musical journey?
Thanks, Phil. What started it? Well, I suppose it was an aptitude test in primary school. If you think back to the 1980s, when they would come round and see if people had a...
It wasn't the old Bentley test, was it?
It might have been. I was about 9. I have no idea. Somebody just took the class into a classroom and sat us down, and all 30 of us or so did a test, and out of that...
Clearly you didn't pass that and you were given a horn.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, what was interesting was that all those that did pass were given trumpets, bar me, that was given a horn. I think he ran out of trumpets and he said, "Oh, you're a big lad, here, have a horn to play instead."
You know, isn't it funny the way that often happens in school? You know, I was given a double bass because I was 6 foot when I was 7. Started a double bassist's career.
Yeah, so I was kind of given the horn to play, and it was kind of what is this thing? And I suppose I played it. I had lessons at primary school, and I enjoyed playing it. I used to go to the St Helens brass band as well, and play in that. But it wasn't until the last year of primary school when the Rainhill High School band came and just did a performance for the school. And I suppose that kind of inspired me, because I was going to Rainhill High the next year, and I kind of went, you know what, I want to be in that band. Really, really want. I really enjoyed that concert and what I heard. I want to be part of it.
I think creating that aspiration is so important, isn't it, for young musicians? You know, you were totally inspired by what you saw the sort of older students doing, and you think, I want to be able to do that. And we've talked about that in previous conversations. You know, we've all been inspired by somebody else who was already doing it, and you kind of think, oh, I want to do that. And that's really why I'm very keen for MWO to go into schools. And, you know, when we do our educational concerts, I think it's such an important thing to show students that there's more out there than just their little few classmates perhaps who are learning, you know, and there's lots of other people playing music as well. So it's nice that had such a profound effect on you as you were beginning.
No, absolutely. And I think I get the real buzz from actually playing as part of an ensemble, not kind of doing solo work. So when we went to high school, got into the high school band, turns out 2 horn players joined that year, and they're the only 2 horn players that joined for the next 5 years. So obviously they had a job lot on horns just at that year. So there was 2 of us that joined, myself and Emma, and we played in there right the way through until we left after finishing A levels. So we were in that band, but that exposed me to firstly playing as an ensemble, but also I mean, think if you put yourself back into the shoes of an 11-year-old, you join a band, and then the first February that you're in the band, the music teacher comes to you and says, "We're going to Mallorca to do a week tour of hotels over there." And you go and you spend a week over February half term playing to basically packed out hotels full of pensioners at that time of year. So it's not those that go clubbing. It's different type of audience. But you sit there and you've got 200, 300, 400 people in an audience, and you're 11. And I was quite astounded, really. I've never seen that, never been exposed to that. And it really, again, inspired me just to carry on and be part of an organisation that really brings music to people, and you can see the enjoyment. And I mean, there was people coming up saying, like, that's the best entertainment we've seen in weeks, and they're going out there for like 2-3 months at a time. So I don't know what that says about the hotel entertainment.
What a great opportunity for you as a young musician to really be going away with all your mates, making the music you love, bringing it to an audience, seeing a foreign country. And it's not just the music making that becomes so important in an ensemble like this, is it? And it doesn't really matter where you go. It's the fact you're going together as a group of musicians, working together and performing like that. And, you know, that's why I particularly enjoy when we do weekend events with MWO and things. If we're all together there for a big workshop weekend or something like that, or a mass bands concert, they're always really exciting times. And we often visit venues to perform and do things that we just wouldn't normally do in everyday life. You know, it's a nice experience. No, and obviously you wanted to continue doing that after you'd left school.
Yeah, no, indeed. And I think what was interesting was I stayed in touch with the head of music, Jenny Birchall, when I went to university, and then after came back, basically started work. And she kind of invited us back when we moved back up north, because we spent a couple of years down south in London and Oxfordshire. So we moved back up north, and she just said, look, you don't need to come to rehearsals, but you can come on the tours just as an assisting adult. So myself and Alison used to go on tour with them. We'd meet them over there. And I would play in the band supporting them. I was pretty much the only horn player by that point. Turns out tenor horns not that popular. But it was that carrying on of that then meant by the time she left, and Phil Palmer, who we know, he took on the head of music there. And it was at that point he said, look, I've just started coming to this orchestra called Maghull Wind Orchestra. Why don't you come along as well? And the two of us pitched up one night. You weren't at the town hall, you were at some church somewhere, but it was really welcoming. And I think the first words out of you was, I played my tuning note or whatever it was. All right, okay, you passed the audition, you're in. And I kind of think, you know what, it's that openness and that friendliness, and I've stayed ever since. And I think I was just talking to Alison beforehand, that's probably about 16 years ago, something like that. It's been
really, goodness, yeah, because
a long time, and I've been with it ever since, because I just enjoy the atmosphere and the ethos so much that I've never really even contemplated doing anything else, to be honest with you. So
yeah, I was working alongside Phil Palmer at the time. We were colleagues at the music service, and we were both directing the wind orchestra. So we did a few, remember we did a few collaborations between the wind orchestra and MWO as well. I can't believe that's 16 years. That's incredible and slightly scary.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was talking to Alison. That's about 8 years ago, and he went, no, it was way more than that.
Yeah, which is incredible considering we're both in our early 20s.
Absolutely.
And Chris, you and I go back a long way as well. So I've got a fair idea of your sort of musical background and how you came to playing, but our members won't have. So could you perhaps give us a brief overview of what got you into music, and both trombone playing eventually and arranging as well?
Yes, my mum was music teacher. She was a heavy music teacher for Sefton Music Sports Service. So, and she ran a choir herself. So I grew up in a very musical environment. And my older sister, she started with the violin, and I wanted to start with the violin as well. But my parents thought they couldn't cope with two violins in the same household, squeaking along. So, along with starting probably around the age of 5 or 6, the piano, I started on trumpet, getting lessons in primary school by Bill Basin. And then I joined the Sefton Youth Percussion Group and Sefton Youth Brass Band and the Southwark Wind Band, run by Geoff Ward. So I played percussion in the wind band and percussion in the brass band. So I didn't really play trumpet in primary school because there was nothing in the primary school for that. But it wasn't until I went to high school that I joined the high school band as well. And then probably around the age of 15, 16, I started euphonium because I was finding the trumpet was a bit too difficult. Mouthpiece was a tad uncomfortable, I would say. So moved on to the euphonium. And that was roughly the same time I joined the Sefton Youth Jazz Orchestra. But I started that on vibraphone. And as I was playing on vibraphone, I noticed that the trombones were quite cool in the band.
I beg your pardon? You said trombones are cool? Cooler
Yes.
than saxophones?
And it sort of got me thinking that a euphonium is quite limited to wind band or brass band. And because, I mean, my dad's very much into jazz, so it's always been in the background throughout my life, but it wasn't until I played in the jazz orchestra that I really got into it. So I thought, if I want to play more in jazz, I do, especially after leaving the Sefton music service, I would need to play something other than vibraphone because I couldn't lug a vibraphone around at the time. So I started trombone, and then probably around the second year in A level, I moved on to trombone in the jazz orchestra. So that was really good. And also throughout that, I was a member of the Boys Brigade, and I played in the marching band on drums in that. So I started on the snare, and then because I was, more of a percussionist than the other people, they bought and invested in a set of tenor drums. So it was 4 tenor drums with a big metal harness, and really heavy, but good fun to play. So I was with the Boys Brigade probably until A levels.
Yeah, I didn't realise you'd done so much percussion work, actually, Chris. I remember you joining the jazz orchestra on the vibraphone and sort of had an awareness that you played a bit of sort of snare drum and things. I didn't realise you were quite so sort of percussion orientated, and I think it's great as well that you moved to the trombone as a sort of use of versatility of an instrument, really, to allow you to access more and more opportunities to perform, really. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes, that was the idea of doing trombone, and I was very percussion heavy growing up, and I actually did my grade 6 percussion through the music service probably when I was about 17, and I was the first person in the music service to do a percussion grade. Right. And I think it wasn't that well done at the time nationally. So my mum, because she had to organise all the timetables, when they were getting the examiner in to do it, they had to make sure they got somebody who knew the percussion grades to be able to help mark it. So at university, there wasn't really much going on apart from drinking, which was another great skill to have as a brass player. Um, and
Very true.
and that's also when I joined the Swing Shift Big Band.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was roughly around the year 2000 when it started up. So that kept my music going through university.
Well, that's exactly why I started Swing Shift, because obviously we played in the Sefton Youth Jazz Orchestra together, and I'm sure Adam will mention that he passed through that jazz orchestra a few years behind us as well. And you know, you come out of education as Geoff, you did through the Rainhill band, and then you suddenly think, well, where am I going to play now? My school bands, I'm too old to play in them, and you know, me being me, decided, well, if I've not got a big band to play in, I'll set one up. And of course, you need to then find the players, and you don't have many contacts at that age. You've got your musical mates, so Swing Shift really sort of became a collection of ex-Sijo guys, didn't it? You know, ex-youth jazz orchestra people, yeah, which is 20 years ago now since that was started. Yeah, and again, you know, I played in that through university as well, because obviously otherwise we wouldn't have had a big band to keep enjoying playing that style of music in, really.
Yeah. And then around when I left uni, and once I was securing a job, and your mother, Doreen, was able to persuade me after several months of talking to me at swing shift rehearsals and every swing shift gig, Chris, do you want to join the Maghull Wind Orchestra? We really need a trombonist.
No,
So,
I think we needed a trombonist, to be honest. I think we were that low on numbers back then.
Yeah, and I joined, it was around 2005, March, April time. And at the time, there was only myself and Dave Denman on trombone. And joining the band was a very positive experience, similar to Geoff. You've made to feel very welcome. And especially Dave, we all know Dave, you know, you can't socialise without a drink in your hand. He was very welcoming, and he just made me feel so welcome. Same with everybody in the band. And as Phil has mentioned in previous discussions, I think it was about a week or two before the AGM. So having the AGM, that was another experience. You know, it's a 2-hour-long argument about what the band uniform should be, and then maybe a little discussion about how to improve the band and move forward. But yeah, with the orchestra, you get to feel very welcome. It's a very friendly atmosphere. So
I think, I think I recently posted about our World in Union video, you know, how proud I am of the band and how much I miss my MWO mates. And I think that's the key to it. We're all mates, good mates. You know, there's over 100 people there who you could say, yeah, they're all my friends, which is a really lovely thing to be able to say, isn't it? And I think we all sort of feel the same about that, really. And that, you know, I hope that members joining now feel just as welcomed as you guys did when you first arrived. I remember Adam's first rehearsal, actually, very vividly. We were rehearsing just before the first sort of big concert we staged, which was at the Metropolitan Cathedral, and we were just about running the set list. In fact, I think you walked in, Adam, to the selections of Star Trek that we played, which is clearly one of Chris's favourites. In fact, I thought you'd started to learn to play the trombone, Chris, because of what was the guy from the Enterprise? He was number 2. Yeah, and he played a bit of jazz trombone on the Enterprise, didn't he? So I thought he might be your trombone hero, to be honest. But we were playing the theme to Star Trek, and we'd already started, and Adam sort of came in with no instrument, and I think I don't think I'd ever taught you. I've taught your brothers, but I kind of knew of you through the music service, and I think our paths had crossed at a couple of gigs and reunion gigs and things like that, hadn't they? And he walked in, "Oh, mate, is there any chance I could come for a play?" I said, "Yeah, no problem. What instrument?" He says, not a word of a lie. I said, "Absolutely anything you like. I've got a car full. What are you short of?" And I think on that occasion we didn't have a euphonium. So you got a euphonium? Yeah, I'll play that. Yeah, and the rest is history, you know. So I just found that quite amusing, because still now, if we're short on a brass part, Adam will cover it. You know, that's not a problem. So yeah, what's your sort of background, Adam, and how did you get involved with the band then?
Well, so my background is I was really lucky. I went to a very musical primary school, went to Summerhill Primary School, and I distinctly remember when I was about 6 or 7, Glenn Waite rocking up with, when Sefton used to do the visit around primary schools, and you'd get a woodwind player and a brass player and a percussion player, and they go, "Here's all the instruments. What do you want to play?" And I remember Glenn doing a brass demonstration. I was like, that looks kind of cool. But initially, similar to Geoff, there was about 4 or 5 of us who went up, and the other 4 got trumpets. And Glenn was like, "You're not a trumpet player, you're a trombone player." I was like, okay. So to me, much to my mum's chagrin, I got this trombone that I lent from Sefton. I was like, look what I got. At the same time, I'd also just started learning drums and guitar as well, so I don't think she was best pleased about this. And then my relationship with trombone and music actually is a little bit different to Geoff and Chris. I did go to a very musical primary school, and Phil, as you'll know, we both went to Days, and there was a lot of music going on at Days.
Yeah.
But actually, for the first 2 years or so of leaving primary school and going to secondary school, I did barely any music, apart from classroom music. And I kept my trombone lessons going, but I was just kind of turning up to them. I wasn't really applying myself outside of lessons. I was being the world's worst student. Literally, the trombone came out of its case for like my lesson and the orchestra on Friday. And it wasn't really until probably about year 9 or year 10 that I actually started getting more involved, and as like a guitarist and vocalist in the rock concerts and a trombonist in the classical concerts, because Days used to run 2 concerts. And then again, going forward, that got me involved. And by the time I was kind of in year 11 and going into 6th form, I was doing the jazz orchestra, the Sefton Youth Choir, and the wind orchestra, and the Maghull Music Service Centre on a Wednesday when we used to have music services running. But even then, when I got to A level, I was still a bit fence sitting. So when I actually started applying for universities, so I applied for 6 universities. Some of them were straight history degrees, and some of them were straight music degrees. And then 2 of them were what I wound up doing, which is I did a dual honours degree in music and history. But even going up to, I consider myself to be a very, very late musical kind of developer. But when I left A level, I was, and I'm not saying this to sound like self-deprecating or anything, but I was a mediocre player, and I scraped through my A levels. And, you know, I got by in Sefton, but I was never really I didn't shine or anything. And it wasn't actually until I got to university, and I played in all of the ensembles at university. And one of the reasons I went to Keele was I was going to be a bigger fish in a small pond. There wasn't going to be, my second choice was Huddersfield, which I auditioned for and I got a place for, but is proper brass band country. So I would have been one of 65,000 trombone players. And I went to Keele, and I was the only bass trombonist, so I played in everything. And I was really lucky. The wind orchestra at Keele at the time, or the concert band at Keele, was very, very similar to Maghull, in terms of there was no audition. And the whole ethos of the band was they used to do a display at the Freshers' Fair, and it was, have you got a clarinet under your bed that you've not played in 3 years? Get it sent down and come down to our Sunday night rehearsal, and we'll do 2 hours of music, and then we'll go to the pub. And that was basically it. And funnily enough, actually, the other week I found a CD that we did while I was at university, and it had the whole E-flat suite on, and I was listening to it, and I was going, do you know what? Actually, that wasn't a bad band at all. And through university and through the contacts I made at university, I started doing more and more playing, and initially probably kind of wasn't good enough to be maybe doing some of the playing that I was doing, but I was playing alongside very good players. And as we all know, when you play alongside very good players, that's how you get better. So I was at Keele for 4 years, did my degree, did my master's, moved back up north to do my PGCE, which I did at Edgehill. And when I moved up north, I've been in Staffordshire for 4 years, and all of my musical contacts were there. When I moved back up to the northwest, all of a sudden I was playing in no ensembles at all. And during my PGCE year, I actually did virtually no trombone playing because I didn't have time. I didn't have a job for the September finishing my PGCE year. So I started the Old Hall Brass Band, which is based in Wigan, and the Wind Orchestra. And I, like you, Phil, distinctly remember that first rehearsal of coming down. And it was my mum, actually, who said, you know, because I'd always, growing up in Maghull, I'd always kind of known of the band, and I'd known it as the Legion Band. But it was like a peripheral kind of awareness of it. And I think, so I don't know if I've ever told you this, my mum used to come to the swing shift when you had a residency in...
the Lodge.
Yeah, she used to come and watch that. And I remember her saying to me, you know, I think that Phil Shotton runs the wind band in Maghull. I was like, okay, colour me intrigued. I'll go down and give it a whirl. Don't know what they need, so I'll take a car full of instruments and just kind of see what happens. Really pray that he doesn't ask me to play first trumpet or something like that. And then kind of the rest is history. And actually, you know, I can credit the Wind Orchestra with a lot of the kind of professional or semi-professional playing that I do now. You know, a lot of that is through contacts and people that you kind of met through the wind band, and then you get introduced to other people and X, Y, and Z, and it's all kind of... Go on, sorry.
Sorry, I really like that element of the Wind Orchestra. The fact I see our Wind Orchestra as a bit of a hub of musical activity, you know, and a real good opportunity for musicians to network with other musicians. You know, the majority of my students play in the Wind Orchestra, past and present. I've sort of gained students through people joining the Wind Orchestra and then saying, oh, any chance we can have some lessons? I've taught some very, very accomplished flute or clarinet saxophone players to play one of the other disciplines because they're interested in doubling. And, you know, and you can sort of find musicians if you need musicians for a theatre show. Well, there's a pool of 80 of them there, isn't there? And you can sort of try and network and find people to help you out. You need a little brass quintet for a gig. Grab a few of your mates from the wind band, and it really does become a sort of real hub of musical activity. And that's why I like the collaborating we do with other bands and other educational institutes and things like that as well, because I think there's a real power in the togetherness of everything that we do. And I think that's a real nice thing that there's you know, there is and there will be after this temporary hiatus, a place where all these musicians can go on a Tuesday without the feeling that they have to go every Tuesday. If they can't, they can't, and there's nothing stopping anybody having a week off, and nobody's going to go, where were you last week? But it's always there and always open for everybody to play in and everybody to meet up. And, you know, it is a good networking sort of tool as well. I think that's a really important part. You know, we have members who join whilst they're at school, and they might go off to university and then they come back again if they move back into the area. You know, and so yeah, I think that's a really nice point, actually. Talking about the doubling, obviously I'm a woodwind musician and I do double on the woodwind instruments, and there's a very specific way to do that, and there's huge differences between the woodwind instruments that you have to take into account. It appears to me, possibly naively, as a woodwind specialist, I watch you guys and you seem to be able to pick up any brass instrument, and you only have to watch our virtual performances to see Chris and Adam and Geoff's virtuosity on the trumpet. Never mind. They
can't hear it though.
Well, that could be a blessing, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
And of course, you know, the difference between slides and valves. How do you go about doubling on different brass instruments? Do you think it's a good thing to do? Has it informed your own practice of playing? And I'm going to start with Geoff, because I remember, Geoff, I'm sure it was Phil Palmer lent you a French horn rather than E-flat. And I seem to remember you bringing that along a few weeks and making some peculiar noises on that, and then eventually returning back to the E-flat horn. But then with Eva starting to learn to play the trumpet, I noticed you're doing a bit of trumpet playing. And how does that work for you? Have you tried any other brass instruments or?
Yeah, so Phil did lend me the French horn, and then Maghull lent me one of his old ones. I had hit that for probably about 12 months, trying to get my head around it. At some point in the distant future, you never know, I might actually get my head around a French horn. I just found it was just too close in pitch to the tenor horn so when I'm playing on a tenor horn, I can play French horn music, and my brain, I've trained it to transpose notes automatically into E flat, and I can do that. But if I pick a French horn up and try to play it, my brain just goes, you're a tone out what you're doing, when I'm not. And I just, it just befuddles me. However, because, Alison was playing the baritone, you kindly lent Alison a baritone about 8 years ago.
Because although don't tell anybody, I've dabbled with brass as well, but it's a secret. Don't tell anyone.
Nobody knows, Phil. Nobody knows.
Oh, not now. Oh, no.
So because she played at the Met concert, and when we were teaching that, it's a fifth lower than the tenor horn, and the trumpet is a fifth higher, and my brain is able to cope with the fifth, weirdly. So actually, if you ask me to pitch a G on the trumpet, I can pitch a G on the trumpet, no problem at all. I can do the same on the other instruments. The French horn, though, was just, I don't know, my brain really struggled with it. From an embouchure point of view, obviously they are different mouthpieces. The baritone is much bigger, similar to a euphonium and a trombone mouthpiece, whereas a trumpet is really, really small in comparison. I don't know. I'm able to do it. My embouchure is able to cope with it. I don't know if Adam and Chris have got any comment on exactly what's going on, but I'm able to just tighten the embouchure from a trumpet point of view, and also be able to do the same from a baritone. I do find, however, what is really interesting is if I've been playing the trumpet and then go back to my horn, the upper range of the horn is much easier to hit because I've been playing with a much tighter embouchure on the trumpet. And Adam and Chris, I don't know if you find that yourselves with the different, moving from one instrument to the other. If you start off at the higher end, do you find that the upper part of the lower brass is easier to get to? And I certainly find that is the case when I'm...
Just before one of our brass answers that, I'm just going to point out that as a woodwind player, and I encourage, if people are going to double, to obviously do it with the right technique, not just blow all the instruments the same. There's very specific ways to do it. But if you do that and you're playing lots of different, even just the 4 saxophones, you develop what I don't think I've come up with this term. I must have read it somewhere perhaps, or maybe I have, maybe I could coin it. But I think you develop a more flexible embouchure, which allows you to then adjust your embouchure for different instruments. And so if I'm playing the baritone sax, I put that hat on and I think I am a baritone saxophone player and I know the chops I need for that. If I go to soprano, I put my soprano hat on, I'm a soprano sax player, and I know that it's a vastly different embouchure. But because of this doubling, it becomes a bit more of a flexible embouchure, perhaps. So I don't know if that relates to brass. I can see I'm absolutely chomping at the bit to tell me I'm totally incorrect.
I think that our difference is, and the big difference between a woodwind and a brass doublet is our embouchure is pressure based, isn't it? So whatever we do, our mouthpiece is going to be on our face, whereas unless you're playing flute, a proportion of your mouthpiece is going to be actually in your mouth. And because interestingly, I'm the only one who doesn't come from a trumpet background. Yes. So I find trumpet very difficult to play because I've got no muscle memory there. So Chris, for example, might not have played trumpet, for 5 years, but he did play trumpet for a long time. So there will be a degree of that muscle memory there. Just like, you might play piccolo once every 6 months. You pick it up, after a minute, that muscle memory is going to be there for you to remember exactly what your embouchure needs to do for that instrument.
Why is a piccolo like a lawsuit?
Go on.
Happy when the case is closed.
Hey.
My piccolo joke. Sorry.
But I think as well, it's much rarer to get a brass player who doubles well across all brass instruments than it is to get a woodwind player who doubles well across all woodwind instruments.
Yeah, you tend to have a high brass specialist, as Geoff, and then low brass specialists such as yourself and Chris, really, don't you? There tends to be a real sort of split there. Whereas, yeah, I do feel happy playing from piccolo to bass clarinet and baritone sax. Yeah, interesting. Do you think it? Do you think it enhances your playing? Like Geoff says, he's found his range is better on the horn if he's been playing a bit of trumpet. Does it enhance your sort of main instrument to double on others?
I think once you're comfortable with what your primary instrument is, then I think it's like anything, isn't it? If you tried to learn to run and ride a bike at the same time, you're not going to do either of them particularly well. Whereas if you've mastered one skill and then you pick up another, chances are they're going to inform one another.
Yeah, verbal skills as well, I guess. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, for me, for example, I can't play any higher on a trumpet than I can on a trombone. So I can play up to about an F on a good day on a little trombone. I can play up to about an F at the top of the treble clef, and that's as high as I can play on a trumpet. Which
is high for a trombone, but
not high for a trumpet.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So I know, and I think the other thing as well, is brass embouchure, I think more than woodwind as well, is very, very, very person dependent. So what is true for me probably absolutely isn't true for Geoff and Chris. Because it's so dependent on how this is set up.
I found that if I do play brass, I can cope with a euphonium or a baritone, a trombone, and a tuba. Although the tuba starts getting a bit too big for me, but the euphonium I had significant success with, really. Try and get much out of a trumpet, and I can't do it, and then I get a bit scared about sort of damaging my woodwind embouchure. So I've never spent any real time trying. But when I was teaching a lot of youth ensembles, I felt it was important. I knew my vowels and I knew the slide and things, so that if a student had to ask me a question, I could say, "Oh, that's this and that's that," and also so I could understand the difficulties of playing these instruments. And I played oboe and bassoon for a little while as well. I remember taking a bassoon into my practice room and knowing that one of us would come out a winner, and it definitely bassoon on that occasion. It was very, very tricky. So I think it's good to have a kind of knowledge, and when we've talked, Adam, about composing, you've said to have a knowledge of the range of the instruments and perhaps a bit of an idea of how they work. I mean, I've heard you play G major scales on saxophones and clarinets. You can produce those notes. So you've got an idea of that. Chris, have you found that your sort of doubling on instruments has informed your arranging?
Yes, especially because I mean mainly brass and percussion. Knowing the limitations of the instrument is useful, and especially when I started on trombone, knowing that if you're going to write a trombone going from C to B in the bottom of the bass clef, they're not going to like you going from 1 or
7
6
to
1, 7 to 1. Very nice, especially if it's quick.
One small step for mankind, one giant leap for the trombone player.
Yes. And again, being in the orchestra, you pick up things I didn't know about with, let's say, with the woodwind, that before the orchestra, I had no idea about the bridge on a clarinet. So I would just do an arrangement thinking that's fine, but then people started talking about the clarinet's bridge, and I thought, a bridge? Why would you need a bridge on a clarinet? And then they told me that it was when you get up to about B on the stave, they have to change the fingering. So that's something, again, that you have to work into your arrangements. It's not just making it sound good, it's making it playable for the musicians.
Yeah, and it's nice that in our band that we can bring arrangements that we've tried doing, and compositions and things, and put them in front of the band, and receive, you know, feedback from the players who are playing them, and in a very positive and constructive way, actually, isn't it? And again, it comes back to that kind of hub of activity and musical hub where we could all share ideas, and it's a nice safe place to work and try things out and achieve some real great results doing it. Before we head into 10 to 9, I wanted to ask you guys, what do you feel are the main sort of challenges within your sections? And here I'm kind of thinking of Adam as a low brass guy, bass, trombone, tuba, sort of the bottom end of the band, and Geoff more the sort of top end, the top end of the first horn. You know, you've got a very, very sort of prominent part mixed with the first altos and occasionally the trumpets and what have you when you're working within the brass team. And Chris, that kind of right bang in the middle of the first trombone, mixing with the youths and the tenor saxes and the third clarinets. What would you say the main challenges are within that role in the wind orchestra?
Well, for me, when I first joined the orchestra, because I am very much an introvert and quiet, hadn't really led a section before, and because Dave was there being very welcoming, but he was still a beginner on the trombone. I felt that, you know, it's helping him with positionings, alternate positionings, and also as a wider band, it's very difficult because, especially if you're sight reading a piece of music, you get into the zone of reading the music, and you have to remember that there is a band there. So you're not there going, right, Geoff, this is how it goes. So I think it's having the confidence to play it confidently, but not overblow and try and battle everybody else in the band.
Yeah, so it's leading without sort of overpowering, I guess. Yeah.
Go on, Geoff.
Yeah, but that's interesting, because I mean, I've always felt that lead by example. If you're on the lead part of a section, putting yourself forward and making sure actually that your part is projected and getting out there is kind of key. I mean, I think one of the key issues, or not issues, but one of the things that from a horn point of view that I find is that the section's quite small. So I mean, we have 2 horns fairly regularly from a rehearsal point of view. We might get 3, might get 4, but we don't very often cover all the parts. And I think in the horn section as a whole, it's Phil, you will turn to us on numerous occasions and you'll go, more horn, and at which point I'll look across to Lee and the two of us will go, all right then, screw the mouthpiece onto the face and let's see where we can get to. But I think that's one of the big challenges from a horn point of view is actually projecting the horn sound over the top of much bigger sections. A saxophone section has got 12, 14 people in it, and we've got 2, 3 people.
Yeah, I think it's a timbre thing as well, isn't it? Because the horns are such a round, warm, pleasant sounding, middle of the range kind of instrument. You know, particularly if, I mean, obviously you're playing an alto horn as is Lee, and if we've got a mixture of alto horns or alto trombone as well in our case, and then French horns as well, it's mixing those timbres to get that round brass sound, but also to have the energy in the airflow and the sound to project it through the band. And then, yeah, that's a balance thing then, isn't it? And when you're, you know, who you're mixing with, are you on your own or you're on your saxes with the saxes? And I'll often say, saxes, I want a little bit less of that because we want this to sound more brassy and have the horn sound kind of taking through and adjust the balance there. But I think it's difficult because of that sort of timbre thing with the horns. But it's one of my favourite brass sounds, the horn, you know, without a doubt.
No, I mean, I really enjoy it, and I mean, you're talking about playing with the other sections. The key thing actually is listening to the other sections and working out how you fit in with it, and then taking a lead from yourself where you say, okay, you want that bit more brassy, or actually, I don't want it more of a woodwind sound. It's taking your lead from that and then balancing out your volume to the appropriate level so that you get what you want as a performance. But yeah, I think the sound that comes from our section is really good, especially when you get the four horns together with the four parts. I think it's
yeah, absolutely. Once you get that full harmony, it's lovely, isn't it? And I do a lot of workshops with bands, and I meet bands maybe once or twice a year, or maybe once and then not again because they didn't like me or whatever. I work with bands all the time, all different bands, not where I see our band every week. And often I'll hear the complaint from musicians in bands: nobody plays their dynamics. And the best way to get anybody to play their dynamics, if you think they're not playing their dynamics, is play your dynamics. And it's just like what you were saying, Geoff, lead by example. If you start playing quietly, people will notice and they'll go, oh yeah, it's a bit quieter here. Or if you're really giving it the beans on a big bit, we get that wide dynamic contrast, which is something I always talk about. But I think it's important for everybody to kind of do that and not just go, well, nobody else is playing quietly, so I'll just play loud, or nobody else, everybody else is just sitting there. Well, actually take responsibility, and that does sort of sometimes come from the lead players, and if the lead has dropped right down, well, absolutely, we've got to tuck underneath that. Yeah. How do you find? Sorry,
Jeff. And just picking up on that, I think I don't think I could play loud for an entire concert or an entire piece as well. The dynamics are there to give contrast to the piece. And I think people have got to think as well, it's like, okay, yes, that bit needs to be heard, this bit doesn't need to be heard. But if you're getting to the point where you're flagging because you've been playing so loud, then perhaps you need to think, actually, why am I so worn out? It's because I've been playing so loud.
Yeah.
And
I think there's a stamina thing for brass as well, isn't there? If you're playing full tilt all the time, it does tire the chops out. If you play full tilt on a saxophone, speaking as a saxophonist, if you play full tilt on a saxophone all night, you'll be a bit tired, but as long as you've got some muscles there, you'll be able to keep going. Whereas brass, it just stops eventually, doesn't it? And you can't make any sound. The vibration in the lips goes, and that's it. And brass players call it they say, "Oh, my lip's gone." Lips totally gone. And that does happen if you're playing full on all night. So yeah, so it's not a good idea. It's not. No. And Adam, how's the sort of bottom end of the brass for you, and where do you sort of see yourself with that?
Well, I think like the bottom end of the brass and the bottom end of the band, the foundation that everything else is built on, aren't they? So like the first thing I'm always thinking of when I'm playing in that section is tuning, because if your tuning is not good, then nobody else in the band stands a hope of having any chance of doing anything else on top. And I think
the bass, doesn't it? The tuning, the sense of time.
That would be the next one. The rhythmic accuracy is and I think as well the other thing, and I've always thought in a wind band and a brass band, the bottom end of the band really should be tuba led. And I remember someone explaining this to me years ago. So it's the tubas provide kind of the depth of sound, and then the bass trombone is the attack. So those two sounds should work together. You get and as a bass trombonist, you can't possibly want to replicate the kind of the width of sound you're going to get from a tuba, because your bell's not the right size, and like you've not got the bore size is right, and you're just not going to sound right. Whereas when you're playing with a tuba section, it's like you give the width, and when needed, I'll give that attack for like any really aggressive sections. And then, as you say, I mean, when myself and Chris stand on the podium, when you're not there, you'll be relieved to know that we say exactly the same thing, because there's nothing worse than standing in front of a band and everything just being there. It's like, and that as well from the bottom end of the band, if you start, like, if you drop right off, the rest of the band's gonna be like, where the hell, where's it gone? So, playing the dynamics that are written and playing the articulate, basically play what's on the page, You play what's on the page, you're going to be halfway there, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's not just looking at the dots, as it's looking what's above the dots and what's below the dots and putting that all together. And I agree totally with the idea of the warmth of the tubas giving that full sonorous sound. And then I always think of the bass trombone as having a bit of the bark. It kind of it has that attack and that punch that you can't get from such a large bore tuba. And it's similar to how the bass clarinet, baritone, saxon, bassoon work together, and those timbres coming together create the sound that we want in the wind band. So as we bring our evening to a close with our three members of the brass, who I forgot to mention, and I'll mention now, although I did say they're on our committee, Geoff is our vice chair, and Chris is our secretary, and Adam is our safeguarding lead. So quite responsible roles within the committee as well, which obviously helps the running of our band and helps us be the best band we can possibly be, and we're all very, very grateful for everybody who works on the committee, as well as giving them musical talents. But to finish off, I wondered if we had any top tips for the rest of the brass playing members of the group, and whether that be a good way to warm up or a good way to warm down, any practice tips, or generally sort of good things to do if you're a brass player. And I must admit, that's not something I know much about. I know, pedal notes are often good and lip slurs are good, but I'm sure you guys can explain that better than me. So any sort of pearls of wisdom for the brass players in the wind orchestra?
Long tones, always. If something is ridiculously high, practice it the octave down, because chances are your fingering or your slide position is going to be the same regardless. So don't muddle yourself embouchure wise until you've got it under your fingers. Get it right 3 times before you move on as well. That's not a brass technique. That's just my personal.
You're kind. I go for 5 times.
You go for 5. I go for
a row. So
three times correct in a row, or 5 if you want to be Phil. And it doesn't matter what you do to warm down, but make sure that you do warm down, because your lips are a muscle. So just like you wouldn't go out for a run without at least warming up and warming down a little bit, you shouldn't just kind of, and hands up, I'm guilty for this, and we all are, walking off the street, pick your instrument up, shove it on your face, and it's fine to do that a little bit, but you have to treat that as a muscle. So I always try and do a little bit of warming up, and that might just be some ascending. I mean, you 3 all know exactly what I do when I warm up and warm down, because I do the same thing every week. F major scale, 2 octaves ascending, arpeggios up and down, because I get my trombone out of the case, and that is just what I do. And it's just kind of a pre-ingrained, and we've all got the ticks. Phil, I know when you get your well, certainly when we used to do swing shift, you get your tenor out and you go to a corner of the room and you do some scales, you do a bit of improv. I can hear Sarah's clarinet warm up, which she got off you as well. Every rehearsal gets a clarinet out, and it's those little things kind of, but getting in the habit of doing it, I think, is really important.
Yeah. How do we feel about buzzing on the mouthpiece? Is that a proactive warm-up technique? If you're sitting waiting to rehearse, and maybe you don't feel confident in rattling through scales and arpeggios in public, although we should all do now, having watched my Fun with Scales videos during lockdown. But maybe it's not appropriate. Maybe we've got audience coming in and things. Is it good to just buzz on the mouthpiece and give it the old kind of stuff?
That's quite good.
Thanks very much. I've been practicing.
I think.
Go on, Geoff.
That's an interesting one, that, because I don't personally, that doesn't help me. Mainly because actually you get a lot of back pressure from the brass instrument itself, and that, because yes, you've got to warm your mouth up and your embouchure, but also you've got the muscles in the neck and the chest as well that you you are warming up in your diaphragm as well. So yes, the buzzing, if you want to just warm the lips up, but I think getting the body ready to play actually is probably key, I think, anyway, from my point of view. Is, and then also you're not warming the instrument up, and the brass instrument needs to be warmed up.
I think Geoff's right, and I think there is a place for buzzing, and it does warm that up. I think if someone was anxious about playing scales and arpeggios, play your fundamental. So if you're a B flat instrument, play a B flat. If you're an E flat instrument, play an E flat. Whatever's open valves or first position, like not necessarily the pedal, but the first note, and just play. You know, as long as you can, deep breath, as long as you can. You know, and just doing that is going to engage, you know, all of the things that you need for brass playing in quite a straightforward and quite a kind of non-invasive way.
Yeah, and perhaps an economical way as well. And, you know, you don't think I have to do something really, really flash on a Tuesday night while everybody else coming in. I mean, I've seen brass players sit there and just first start off with taking a few breaths in, blow it out, and then I've seen them move that to a, and then put that on the mouthpiece. Then put the mouthpiece in the hooter, and then you get the fundamental. And you know, it's only sort of 3 or 4 steps, but it's just got you in that kind of thing. And I think Adam, you said do it every time. I think that's key. That's why we play the warm-ups in band, and we have the communal warm-up all together as well. You know, everybody has their own little things to warm up, but then we warm up as a band with a few scales and chorales and things like that. And again, it's almost a psychological thing to say, right, whatever's happened in the day has happened in the day, but now we're sat down at band, let's try and clear our minds and have 2 hours of focused music making, and it just settles everything down, doesn't it? I think, which is great. Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to chat all things brass. We could probably talk for another time, and maybe we'll invite you back to cover some more topics of brass playing in the future. But really nice to find out a little bit more about your backgrounds and how you find being part of the band. I appreciate you talking to me this evening, and I am even more excited about seeing you from the podium as soon as we can get back rehearsing to safely do so. But for this evening, thank you very much for joining us. Geoff Ward, Adam Dutch, Christopher Horswood. Chris has had a dual job tonight. He's been on the interview and doing the behind-the-scenes technical wizardry. Thank you to everybody who's watched in real time, and thank you to everybody who's watching in the future. We'll see you all again very soon. Thanks for now. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.